Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how to set up Voicemeeter Banana in 2026. So I'm actually going to show you how to set up Voicemeeter from scratch, how to add effects to your voice, and later on I'll also show you how to set up Voicemeeter Banana for OBS and for Discord. But first guys, if you want, you can go down on this video in the comment section and click on the first comment that I pinned. This will bring you to my Fiverr, and here you can get a YouTube logo and banner or a modern minimalist YouTube logo and banner for your YouTube channel. But now back to the video. Now first off, if you don't have Voicemeeter Banana yet, I have a video up here in the right corner that actually goes over how to download and install Voicemeeter Banana and shows you all of the steps in case you didn't have the software yet. Make sure you check out that video. Now, as you can see, we have Voicemeeter Banana right here. I do first want to quickly go over the Voicemeeter Windows outputs. So if I minimize this, and I'm going to go down here and click on the speakers. And then here I'm going to go to the Windows sound output. And here now for the moment mine is at the speakers, but it could sometimes also go to cable input, and that means that you don't hear anything at the moment. So in that case you can just go back to your speakers. And of course here as well we have other Voicemeeter outputs you can choose from. Now to actually go more in detail, we can actually go back here, right click this time, and go to sound settings. Just scroll down until you see more sound settings. And there you go, we have this window. I'm just going to close this. Now you do have to be careful what you select here, because you're probably not going to hear anything anymore depending on what you're going to select. Now here for the moment, as we saw earlier, I have my speakers set as a default, so you can actually do that here. You can click set default if you want that device in question to be set to that. Now if you go down here, of course we have other Voicemeeter options. So you could, for example, choose the cable input. If I go down here, you have the Voicemeeter aux input. That will be this one right here. So they do correspond to what you see right here. And so if I then, for example, go to my recording and also go down, in my case, I have my microphone selected as a default once again. But you could also in this case, for example, do the Voicemeeter out B1, so that you can hear it in Voicemeeter, or the cable output. But don't worry, I'll explain in a minute what that all means. Just know that here in the Windows sounds, you can select an input and output. I personally prefer to keep it at my basic speakers and microphone and change anything within here afterwards. But if you're going to go for one, you're going to have to click on it and then do right click, properties. You want to go to advanced, and here you have a whole list of options. Now you do want to make sure you're either on 2-channel 24-bit 48,000 Hz studio quality, or 2-channel 16-bit 48,000 Hz DVD quality. Any of those two would be the best options to choose in that case. So do make sure that you click that, you click apply, and then you click OK. And also make sure you do that in playback, whatever one you select right here. If you choose a Voicemeeter one, you'll have to do the same process. Now lastly, if you go to the communications tab, you also have the option to do nothing. This is basically when any sound, any alarm, any calls come in while you're doing anything in Windows. Now if you have, for example, this selected, then all of your sounds will go down by 80% while that alarm is going off, for example. But if you don't want that, if you just wanted to have the same volume while, as I said, like a call, an alarm, anything goes off, you have to do nothing, so that you have full control over the sound that are also incoming. Now while you're using Voicemeeter, this could actually be quite a useful option. In that case, make sure you select it, and once again you do apply and OK. And so here we are in Voicemeeter Banana. Now if you're new to it, it might seem a bit complicated at first, but it's actually easier than it seems, and I'm going to break it down to you one by one. Now to start off, there's actually a newer feature. If you go up here, you'll see that there's going to be text that will appear here. If I go upon anything with my mouse, up there will be a sentence explaining whatever that option does in question. So that's actually very nice. It briefly explains you what that option does, which is something that's a bit more recent, let's say, within Voicemeeter, which I think is a very nice addition. But then I'll go over the first 3 stereo inputs, so the hardware inputs. This one is actually called stereo input 1, but I just renamed it. And so these will be physical inputs. So anything, for example, like a microphone. Then here on the side, if you go over here, you have 3 physical outputs. So link to here. And it also says here underneath physical in case you're hesitant. Then our 2 virtual inputs are right here. So Voicemeeter input and Voicemeeter aux. These are going to be our 2 virtual inputs. And then here on the right side, at the end here, we have the 2 virtual outputs. It can be once again routed, so linked to there as well. So that's the layout simplified. Now if you had any, for example, settings that you still had lingering around, you can go up to menu here. Then you want to go down and you look for reset settings. So it's like a reinitialization. You click on it to ask this little message and you click yes. So after that, anything you did here will be reset. Now I didn't have any settings to begin with, but once again, in case you had some smaller settings you didn't really like that were lingering around, that is how you can actually reset it. Now if I go back up here and go to menu and go just underneath that, it's going to be system tray. Now system tray is in case you want a little icon down here. So if you go to this arrow, here are going to be the icons. These could be running in the background. And so if you want to minimize or close Voicemeeter and you want to make sure it actually goes to the icons, then you have to select this option. And if you immediately want, for example, Voicemeeter Banana to launch when you actually start up Windows, you can also go to menu and go to run Windows on startup. So in that case, every time you start up Windows or your computer, Voicemeeter Banana will automatically start up as well. If you want that, you can select that. If I then go down to system settings, I just want to show you down here that the sample rate should be 48,000 Hz. You can go for 44,100. Sometimes Sometimes that might be better than 48,000 Hertz. If you have any problem with that, you can go down to this one. But do know that generally 48,000 is definitely advised. It's like the best quality. 88,000, for example, 200 is going to be too much. And 32,000, I would say, is quite low. Now there might actually be some cases where you have a problem with latency. So if, for example, you're talking and you only hear your voice a couple of milliseconds to a second later, that means that's some kind of delay. Now that's called latency. And in that case, you want to go here. Now I'll tell you in a minute what WDM and MME are. But basically if I go to WDM here, which is generally what's going to be your input, so your microphone, is going to give you this middle message, basically saying that you shouldn't have to change it, but we're actually going to do that, so we click OK. Here from the list, you can actually bring it down, which is generally going to help if you bring down these samples, if you're running into any latency problems. Now, there could also be some cases where you're too low and then you want to bring it up a bit, but generally you want to bring this down, and that should already help by getting a more direct signal without too much delay in there. Okay, so I'm going to close this. In this video, I'm specifically going to use the A1 here, so I'm going to put this to stereo repeat and also B1. So I'm also going to make sure I just have to click like 4 times and I'll have stereo repeat. This really depends how much you're going to use here. It gives you that stereo quality, which you of course want. Now then I actually immediately want to go to hardware, so stereo input 1. And to start off, you can actually rename this. So if you right click, you can name this whatever you want and just click enter and to rename the tab. Now then if I actually want to add my microphone, I click on it. Make sure that in most cases this is going to be a WDM. Sometimes it's possible that MME might work better. You can test that around if you're running into any problems, but by general rule, you probably in most cases want to go for WDM here. And then you select your microphone. So I have a Blue Yeti microphone, so I'm going to choose this one. So there you go. Now my microphone sounds like it just comes raw out of the box. There are currently 0 effects on my voice, and I actually also show you how to add an output. So if I go up here and I go to the A1, now in this case you generally want it to be an MME. Now it could be, once again, if you're running into any problems, that it could also be WDM. You could alternate between the two, test around, but in this case generally you want it to be on MME. Then here I actually put it on cable input, but you could, for example, also set it to your speakers, of course, or any other output device that you have here. Now, actually something nice you could do is if I go to A2, you could also, once again, I do advise you to set it as an MME in most cases. You could select a second output device. If you want to, for example, connect a second pair of headphones, hear it on like speakers or a TV, anything like that, you can actually have the first one where you just hear it in your headphones, and the second one, if for example you're with a friend, you could connect your first pair of headphones to A1 and the second pair of headphones to A2. Up to 3, of course, so that's definitely something nice if that's an option you want. Now there's also an option to hear yourself speak in Voicemeeter and hear any other sounds that come in or out of Voicemeeter, and by that you go to A1 here, go back down to MME, and in that case you'd want to select your speakers. Now when you will select your speakers and you already had a microphone here, you will hear your own voice. Now if you actually want to stop hearing yourself speak, so you probably have the A1 to MME and then to speakers, which means you can hear yourself. To actually disable that, make sure you click on A1 here. So if you unselect A1, like that, it will actually make sure that you don't hear your own voice anymore. But others would still be able to hear your voice if B1 is selected. So if you actually unselect A1 or B1 here, it will stop routing to these here. So also do keep that in mind, that is actually very important. A is going to be the sound that you will hear in Voicemeeter, and B will be the sound that other people will hear. So that's a very important detail to keep in mind. So then I actually want to show you how to change your voice in the first hardware input. Now if I start changing this around, you might hear the difference. I'm here in the lows, so my voice will get lower. Now if you go over here, it will get a bit too low. So you generally don't want to do it too much. I can put it around here, but do keep an eye on that. In this part, your voice gets too thin. So that's probably also something you would like to avoid if you go too thin. And if you put it up here, you get an echo on your voice. If that's something you want for some reason, you can also do that. And if you then double click, it will reset it again. So those are some nice filters you can add on your voice. Now if I remain within this square and I right click, I'll get the modulation. Now I'll just do this a little bit, because as you can see, it does change my voice quite a bit. Now the more you go up, the larger the sound will be, the more modulation there will be. So if that's an effect you want, do know that that is an option. And then if I right click once again, I'll have the panning. So if I do this, I'll go to your left ear, and if I do this, I will go to your right ear. And I can also do it up here in like a 3D graph, if that is something you want, but you generally want to make sure it's double clicked and in the middle, so that people actually hear you in both ears, which is quite important, but do know that there's this panning option as well. And then we can just right click again to bring us back to the voice effects. Then here we have comp, which is going to be compression. Now this is pretty subtle and you have to know what you're doing a bit. If you use compression, probably by the way, don't want to go over 2 here, depending of course also on your microphone and your recording environment. It'll generally also boost a bit your volume of your voice a bit, but generally keep in mind that compression is pretty subtle and you probably don't want to bring it like above 2 in general. Then here we also have a noise gate, and I can also start bringing that one up, but same, I wouldn't really put it above 2, because as you can see, if I go further, I'll show you it actually starts cutting off my voice. So I'll show you an example right here. If I exaggerate it, it's going to bring my voice up quite a lot, and you'll hear that sometimes my voice will cut off. So yeah, of course, don't do that one too much either. If you're gonna use that one as well, you can double click to reset it. Then of course you will have volume. Bringing this down is gonna make it quieter, so now my voice will get more quiet. And if I then actually put it up, it will become louder. Now watch out, you don't put it too loud because it starts being in the red, and the more you bring it up here, the louder it will get, which is something you want to avoid because otherwise you might be clipping, which means that it distorts your voice and that it's too loud. So definitely make sure you avoid that. If you go to the volume levels here, it's a bit subtle and it might be difficult to get it at first, but you have to right click and drag. What you can also do is just right click and type, for example, 3, and as you can see the limiter will appear. Now the limiter is basically a limiter of the sound, so if I for example put it at 3, any sound that goes above 3 will be limited, will be cut off, so I cannot actually go over that amount. So if that's something you want to make sure at all times that it doesn't go over a certain dB, you can use this one. It could actually be quite useful. And as I said, you can use your mouse to drag it here. You can just bring it up like this again or change the value. If I remain in my microphone tab, we also have the mono option. Now mono, you generally only want to select it if you hear your microphone in only one ear. Mono could actually help you to get it in both ears. Otherwise, it will basically just make your sound louder, your voice. Down here we have solo, so this is actually just going to solo this audio channel here. So if I click on it, for example, you can see the other ones will automatically be muted and only this one will be active. So if you don't want it, you can of course click on it and then the other channels will be available again. Lastly, mute, it speaks for itself. It's going to mute your microphone. So if I click this, you wouldn't be able to hear me anymore, and so in that case you can individually mute some channels if you temporarily don't want to hear anything. So that is of course an option you have as well. Now imagine if I wanted to save all these settings in this one single tab here. I can go to the word Intellipan, right click, and so I could reset anything, copy, paste, but I can also save it. So if I do save all, it once again will save everything in this channel, maybe only the compressor or the gate. I can also load it. So if I already saved something, I can also click on load and basically load the settings that I already saved in the past. So if that's something you want, you know you have this option here as well. It's a bit hidden, but now you know. Okay, so there you go, I have my normal recording voice back. Actually, I also wanted to mention that if you, for example, have the microphone on the first hardware input, you can also go to the second one, click here, probably do a WDM again, and go for the cable output. Now, if you don't have that one yet, I also have a video up here that shows you how to download the VB virtual audio cable. And so in that video, I'll actually show you exactly how to download and install it, and all of these steps that goes with it. So if you don't have it yet, make sure to check out that video. You can put that one, for example, in the stereo input too. Now, it is called cable output, but it is actually going to be into a input, so it's a bit confusing. But you do want to choose that in case you want people to hear audio that you are currently hearing. So whatever other audio in terms of music maybe that you are listening to, or any other form of audio, you can actually make them listen to it as well if you select the cable output. And if that's the case, also make sure that in Discord you have selected it to the cable, if you use that as an example. Okay, so now I'll talk about the virtual inputs. First off, if you still have your microphone but you don't want to use your microphone or hear yourself, now once again you can unselect A1 if you don't want to hear yourself, or you can just click here and completely remove the selection. As you can see, the microphone now will be gone. In my case, I won't really need it. Now, so we have two virtual inputs here, and we have the choice between the Voicemeeter input and Voicemeeter aux. Depending on which one you want to connect, you go down here to your Windows sounds, you click on the icon, then we're going to go back to the Windows sound output. You go down and make sure, like I'm going to use this one for example, the Voicemeeter input, that Voicemeter input VB audio Voicemeter VAIO is selected here, if that's the one you want to go for. If I wanted to go for the other one, the aux, I would have gone to this one, the Voicemeter aux input, and in that case I would hear anything that happens for the Voicemeter aux virtual input. But I'll use this one as an example, so make sure it's selected. Then I also want to directly hear what I'm doing myself, so I'm going to go to A1 and just make sure that my output is going to be on speakers. This will mean that I will hear any changes directly into my headphones in this case. Now, if that's not something you want, you can of course also go for another output device like the cable input if you don't want to hear it yourself. And so now I'm actually going to show you with an example how the virtual inputs work. Okay, so there we go. I actually found an example here from the channel Eternal Depth. And so now, as you saw earlier, I actually routed to the Voicemeeter input. So if I start playing the music, for example, we will see that we already have a signal here and here as well. So we have a little signal, so I can for example do the volume. As you can see, bring it down, you pretty much hear nothing. But if I bring it up, you can hear it a bit better. And what I can then also do is there's going to be a basic equalizer integrated. It's going to have the highs, so the treble. If I start putting this up, as you can see, it does something with the clarity. Now you won't put this up too much, really depends what you're working on. But that basically does like the high end. Then we have the mids. Basically the frequencies in the middle. Same, you probably don't want to bring it up too much. It's going to make it mumbled because you're removing the mids. And of course the bass. That's something you want to work with. As you can hear, it's going to accentuate the bass. It's going to make it very thick. So that is actually how you use the Voicemeeter inputs with this little equalizer that is integrated. Okay, so now I wanted to show you how to EQ your voice in Voicemeeter Banana. As you can see in the stereo input one, I re-audited my microphone. So of course I did once again WDM and my microphone, which is the Blue Yeti microphone. So I just have connected here. Now I don't have any effects on my voice once again. And I just made sure here that this one is connected to A1 and B1. So what I'm going to do then is actually go to A1 here in the physical outputs. And I'm going to click on EQ. Now make sure that you first just click on it so that it is blue like this. That will mean it's enabled, because if it's just grayed out like this, it's disabled. So make sure that it is blue and enabled. Then you want to right click, and as you can see, the EQ tab will appear here. By the way, if you want to hear what you're actually doing, you can go back here, go to A1, and of course then most of the time go for MME and select your speakers, so that you actually directly know and hear what you're doing with the EQ. Now don't worry if you don't know much or anything about EQ. I'm going to try to explain it to you simply. First of all, anything under 100, here as you can see, if I go down here, you'll see 100 Hertz. This is going to be the low ends, but very rumbling, bad low ends. So something you generally don't want, especially if you're working with a voice. You could also in some instances cut this, but you don't have to. You don't always have to do that. It's only really from 100 up to like around 200 where the interesting low end is going to be. And here's going to be some muddiness and some boxed sounds, which you don't really want. So up to like 800 and 1000, you don't really want to touch that. Let's say 800 or 1000 and 2000 here, we're going to be in the mids, the mid frequencies, and then up to like 2000 and up here towards the end is going to be the higher frequencies, and this is the openness, the airness. But I'm going to show you that in practice. So I'm going to start with the low ends, but as I said, anything under 100 isn't really interesting. So I'm going to go immediately to this second one. I'm going to do this at like, I would say around 150. It's a nice middle ground between the two here. And I can start bringing it up, as you can see, in dB. I want to do this around quite a bit here. Now, if you can hear, now I'm going to exaggerate it a bit. As you can see, I'm going to add a bit too much. You will hear what it actually changes to my voice. So let's say like this, but I also want to make this smaller, because now it's going to cover too much frequencies. I'm going to focus more on a smaller range of frequency, as you can see, and make it smaller. And not too small actually, I want to be it around here, I guess. So we have already like a nice low end going on. Not too much, because I don't want to take the bad frequencies with me. Then as I said, you can go here from 200 to 400. It's not really interesting. If you boost or cut anything here, it's going to be muddiness. Same with like 400 to like 700, 800-ish, it's going to be boxed. So anything that's here, if you want to boost that, it's going to be pretty much a boxed sound. You don't want that either. So I'm actually going to start by going to 1500, around there, and actually cut this, because as you can see, as I start boosting it, I don't really like how my voice turns a bit thinner. I don't really like it. But if I do this too much as well, you will hear that it gets way too thick, too muddy. So I don't want that either. That's why we once again have to find like a middle ground. I would say around -3, I like that. Yeah, let's do it a little bit more like this. Okay, so as you can see, I did a little cut in the mids here, so in the mid frequencies. And then we're going to go into the high frequencies, which is pretty important. I'm actually going to bring that up to 4K. Doesn't have to be exact once again. This is definitely something you want to boost, because we do want some clarity in there. Now, not too much, because as you can hear, it will get very thin. That's not really nice. So we want to almost at 4, but definitely make this more narrow. I'm gonna make this quite specific actually. Something like this. I'm really just aiming for that 4K frequency. Then this one, I want to go down to 6000. And same, I'm gonna boost this one as well. The thing is, this is also gonna be some clarity, some high frequencies. But this one, the more I put it up, it'll actually give you a lot of sibilance, so a lot of kind of sounds. And that is definitely something you want to avoid. So around the 6K, even though it's some good clarity, make sure this one is gonna be a bit calmer than the 4K. Okay, and then the last one, which is gonna be anything above like 10K, and that's going to be more like airness, openness. But what we do actually want to do here is select this one down here, and it's going to make it like, as you can see, like an open part here, which is going to be very nice. There we go. So that really depends to what extent you want to do this, but it does help to actually bring out some more like airness, openness, whatever you're doing. That is something you could put on your voice. Now you can actually just close this. Don't worry, it's not going to remove the effects. As you can see, as long as this is blue, it's going to be enabled. Now once again, if I do this, right now it's going to be disabled. So now actually my effects that I just put on my EQ are disabled, so you won't hear them. And if I do the blue again, right now, as you can hear, the effects are back. And if I right click again, you can see exactly once again what I did in EQ. But anyway, I definitely advise you to use the EQ if you're going to use Voicemeeter to make your voice better. This EQ right here is for sure the best way to go. I can do something similar to what I did. You don't have to copy it, because of course every microphone and especially voice is different. But do keep in mind the basics that I just explained. So then I also wanted to mention the tape recorder here, so the digital cassette. Of course, it will also work like an analog tape recorder. So here you have the rewind button, so go backwards, the forward button. This is of course going to be play, pause, stop the recording, and the actual recording button. So the ones that are selected here is going to be where it will be routed to. So now it could record everything that's happening. Now in case you just recorded something and it stopped, you can click here and choose where you want it to be saved. I actually made my own Voicemeeter folder in documents, and so now I could decide where I want the recording to be. So as you can see, this is an example recording, and so you could also open one if you want to. Now if I'm on the same place here, but this time I I right click, you can see here two options. Now the pre-fader inputs are going to be the raw sound of, for example, your microphone without any effects on these. If you switch to the post-fader outputs, it will be anything after. So these are anything that you audit in terms of effects, like the voice effects you audit here, the EQ, will be added to your recording if you choose this. So this is with effects. Then here you can choose where you want it to be saved. So this is going to be where you can browse for the directory, the file type, sample rate. Once again, I do advise you to be that at 48,000 Hz. You can put this to 32-bit, for example. It's a bit higher of a quality, and some other smaller options here. And after you stop recording, if you're all done, just like with an analog tape recorder, go ahead and make sure that you go first of all to menu here in settings and make sure you eject the cassette. So release audio file once you're completely done to really finish off the process here with the tape recorder. So now I'm actually going to show you how to set up Voicemeeter Banana for OBS. So if I am in OBS right here, I'll actually first go to the settings and I'll start with the output and go to audio. Now, no matter how much tracks you use, I do advise you to set it at 320. It's the best audio bitrate. You can bring it down to like 160 if you really feel like you need to, but in generally speaking, the best quality here will be best, so 320. Then I'm going to go to the actual audio tab. Up here, as I mentioned, 48,000 kHz is definitely going to be the best. If you're really running into any problems, 44,100 is an option as well. Channels, stereo. Then here's going to be the important part. I just have set my output to speakers and my input to microphone for the recording. But if you, of course, for example, want to use Voicemeeter, so here we're going to go to the mic, so this is going to be the input. Now, as you can see, you can select the Voicemeeter options here, and I definitely would advise you to go for the Voicemeeter out B1. Because as you remember what I said earlier, A1 is what you're going to hear, B1 is what other people are going to hear. Once again, if you connect the microphone here, it's B1. You can also do B2. In case you're using B2, make sure it's B2, but it has to be either one of those. Now, you could alternatively, if you want to use something else, go for the cable output, or the virtual audio cable, if that's the one you're going to use. For the output, now, as we saw earlier, if you're going to use either one of the virtual inputs for the desktop audio, make sure that you either sometimes select your basic speaker, so your headphones, that's also possible, or you go for one of the two. So for example, the Voicemeeter input here, which is this one, or up here, the Voicemeeter aux input, which is the second virtual input here, as you can see. So that will correspond to this one. So that's if you want to use the virtual inputs. Otherwise, once again, the cable input is an option. So I'm going to show you how to set up Voicemeeter Banana for Discord. So here in Discord, you want to go down to the user settings, then go down until you see voice and video. Now at times this will be on default, which is something you could do in some cases, but it's generally not advised. So if you're, for example, going to add an input here, so the microphone, this is going to be in most cases, once again, the out B1. So if you connected your microphone right here, then it's going to be either B1 or B2. So you have selected, in any case, one of these two. So for the input, out B1, or the cable output in case you're using that. Then for the output here, so the speakers, if you're going to use the virtual inputs, you'll have to go either for the Voicemeeter input, so the VB audio Voicemeeter VIO, which is going to be this first virtual input. And if you're going to take this one, so the Voicemeeter aux input, it will be this virtual input right here. So of course, that's once again if you want to use the virtual inputs, but otherwise, you can also go down and of course use the cable input, so the virtual audio cable, as an output here. Okay, so then lastly, of course, also one of the most important steps is going to be saving the project. So by that you actually go up to menu and do save settings. So it will be a .xml file, and it will either go to a path that Voicemeeter sends you to. So it could be in, like, as you can see up here is the path, the local disk. Program files then in VB and Voicemeeter. So that's somewhere where you could save it. But you can also, for example, go to documents, make your own folder and save it in there. It really depends. It's whatever you want, as long as you know where you saved it. So you would give this a name and then .xml and click save, of course. Then if you want to load any settings that you saved in the past, you want to go up here to menu. This time you do load settings. Of course, once again, you find them back wherever you have saved them. So you find them back, you click on it, or you do open here, and that will load any Voicemeeter Banana settings so that you want it to load. Now you might have also seen here the load settings on startup option. You can also click that, but from my experience, my settings already always loaded whenever I was launching Voicemeeter Banana. But in case, of course, make sure you select this one if that is something you want. Whenever Voicemeeter launches, your settings automatically do as well. So anyway, guys, definitely somewhat of a lengthy video here. Really try to cover as most as possible here in Voicemeeter Banana, making a full Voicemeeter Banana tutorial guide. Now, of course, if you do have any questions, leave them down below. Please leave a like, would be really nice. Subscribe would also be really nice, and hope to see you guys in my next video. Bye.